WWE at press conferences and board meetings when they review their salaries and their earnings for a particular year. When they ever overgo something critical for WWE, that is when Vince McMahon is at his best. There for a while, a few years ago on WWE.com, if you actually watch the streaming of board meetings, which they had periodically on WWE's website when they showed their earnings and their quarter earnings for the entire year, or something else critical going on with the WWE, like press conferences for pay-per-views like WrestleMania and SummerSlam, Vince McMahon will be always promoting the WWE by being the spokesperson and promoting the event, saying how proud he was that they were at their 20th anniversary, their 25th anniversary, or whatever, and he was just Vince McMahon. He wasn't the on-screen character Mr. McMahon. Occasionally, he would kind of portray himself as the Mr. McMahon character, or more so as his off-screen personality than an on-screen personality like Vince McMahon from the Attitude Era. And I think that out of character, Vince McMahon is far more professional than he is when he's in character, and I think he's one of those wrestlers and characters in the WWE that we can honestly say has difficulty separating his on-screen character from his real-life personality, because when he gets into character, he kind of overkills the character. He's into overdrive, being Mr. McMahon, and I think that's really what makes Vince McMahon seem senile on television. Now, he can be a real good performer, and he can really have his character traits down pat, which obviously he does, but I think that he really overkills the Mr. McMahon character when he gets into character, and preferably I'd rather prefer the Vince McMahon commentator than the Vince McMahon character from the old school years of WWE when he was calling events like SummerSlam 1994 and WrestleMania 10. That is the Vince McMahon from the on-screen Vince McMahon that I've enjoyed the most, the commentator more so than the actual character. Now, I know there are wrestling fans out there that prefer the character more so than the commentator who commentated the majority of the WWE programs, and I understand where you're coming from. But the state of mind that Vince McMahon is in right now does not fit at all with characters like Dolph Ziggler and Alberto Del Rio. I'd much rather be seeing them involved with feuds with the general managers more so than people like Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon at his age right now does not belong on WWE television. If he still wants to have something to do with his organization, then he can be a promoter outside of WWE television. He can be appearing at these press conferences, he can be speaking for WWE, and if you actually go through the WWE.com archives or through YouTube and actually get a chance to see some of these press conferences or streams that have happened on WWE.com over the years, you will get an exemplification of what I'm talking about. The Vince McMahon, the promoter, is a far more better individual than the Vince McMahon character we have seen ever since 1998, 1999. Now, he was consummate during the Attitude Era, and I think that from his performances that he gave us during the Attitude Era as a consummate character and an in-ring performer in feuds with the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, even when he promoted Religion in 2006 at the halfway point of the early thousands before we were crossing over to 2010, 2011, when Vince McMahon challenged Religion and feuded with Shawn Michaels for that year's WrestleMania 22 pay-per-view. He was a good performer then, and a lot of YouTube videos can really back up what I'm saying about Vince McMahon. But if you go to 2010, 2011, when he was feuding with Bret Hart for the first time in 12 years, since Bret Hart had returned to WWE for the first time since the Montreal Screwjob in 1997, which was really the focal point of WrestleMania 26, apart from the contributions of The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels that year, and the feud he had with CM Punk in 2011 over how CM Punk wanted to take the entire WWE hostage and take the WWE Championship to independent organizations like New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor. Vince McMahon's character was just on a downward spiral from at least 2010 up until this point in 2013. The most beneficiary thing that he's done recently on WWE television is kind of take Triple H out of the ring, because Triple H has contributed more than enough years out of professional wrestling, and he should be focusing on the business aspect of the WWE more so than wanting to be a consummate in-ring performer. It's not 1999 anymore, and the business is not about superstars like Triple H or The Undertaker anymore. Yes, we can rely on them to give us 1 to 2 good matches every year for an event like WrestleMania or SummerSlam, or be involved in some kind of short-term program with the likes of Brock Lesnar, someone who is on their same level. But you can't always depend on Triple H to always be giving us 5-star matches night after night. We thought we would see it with Stone Cold Steve Austin, but before not too long, Stone Cold Steve Austin was forced into an unfortunate retirement at WrestleMania 19 in 2003 in his final match with The Rock, because he was always being overworked night after night as an in-ring performer and as the WWE Champion, as the top superstar. Arguably, he's gone down in history as the greatest superstar of all time, and for Cheap Shots with Jonathan Clark, we showed you the speech that Stone Cold Steve Austin gave in 2007 for his Hall of Fame induction, and how he believed that he contributed more than enough years. He believed that his door of his wrestling career had finally been closed with his induction in the 2007 Hall of Fame class as the featured inductee, and rightfully so. But it was because Stone Cold Steve Austin was overworked and fused with the likes of Vince McMahon and The Rock that he was forced into an early retirement. I think that Vince McMahon has really allowed all these years of being a performer and a character for WWE really go to his head, and we're seeing that take effect finally after all these years of contributions. And that's why I really believe that Vince McMahon has become nothing more than a disgrace. Back in 2001, 2002, when the Attitude Era was really dying out and the purchase of WCW and the end of days for WCW were upon us, we had him in affairs with the likes of Stacy Keibler, Trish Stratus. He virtually had an affair with every woman the WWE had hired in the early thousands. Either they were his personal assistant or they were his girlfriend, in some kind of feud that he was having with his entire family and his senile wife, who was really put into a vegetative state during the feuds with the likes of Trish Stratus and Stacy Keibler, where Vince McMahon was involved in some kind of alleged affair. He did virtually everything, and it was said for a lot of DVD documentations that Vince McMahon did virtually everything for the WWE. But right now in 2013, at this point, I really don't care what Vince McMahon has done for the WWE, and I really don't care what Vince McMahon does in years to come, because his best years as a performer and a promoter are behind him. And the Vince McMahon DVD really chronicles how far Vince McMahon has come in the WWE. I mean, he was once an announcer for his father during the territorial days, and he expanded off that. He finally purchased the WWF from his father and turned it into a worldwide phenomenon, and it's been that way ever since. The WWE is not going to go down from this point. The problem that I have is the fact that Vince McMahon still feels a desire to be an in-ring performer. Now, I know that after doing something for about 30, 40 years, you just can't up and walk away from something that's been your life, because the WWE, we can honestly say, has become Vince McMahon's life. It's been Vince McMahon's life ever since he could remember. But I would like to remember the Vince McMahon character from the Attitude Era. I'd like to remember Vince McMahon, the commentator, and of anyone that we've seen in the way of Vince McMahon and the WWE, I'd much prefer to remember the Vince McMahon commentator than any aspect of his career, because he commentated some of the best matches in WWE history, and I think that now he's just being very unbeneficiary. I'd much rather see Vince McMahon as part of these press conferences on WWE.com, and you can see some of them probably on YouTube for past WrestleManias or past SummerSlams to get a better illustration of what I'm talking about when I say that Vince McMahon off of camera is a far more professional individual than he is when the camera is on for editions of Raw and SmackDown, and you see the Vince McMahon character coming out 150% of the time, which is something that has really been overkill, and more so ever since his return. Ever since his return after being fired in 2011, he's been very unbeneficiary to wrestling fans. You know, wrestling fans are more so making a joke out of Vince McMahon than they are supporting the fact that Vince McMahon is back. You know, he still comes out with that disgraceful power walk. He comes out believing that he runs the WWE still fully, when every individual of the McMahon family has a certain percentage of the WWE in terms of control, and he's really tired of the same kind of thing happening with superstars like John Cena and Randy Orton all the time. Recently, he teased a feud with John Cena. He believes now that he's in search of a superstar who can finally beat John Cena and end his recent title reign ever since defeating The Rock at WrestleMania 29. He said that he wanted a superstar kind of like how Triple H was about 10 or 15 years ago, only 10 or 15 years younger than Triple H, someone who can beat John Cena. So he's teased a lot of feuds with his own son-in-law and John Cena, but I think we're a long way away from seeing Vince McMahon involved in a feud with a new talented superstar, much less a legend. And I think that we're never going to see that, because the Vince McMahon character that I remember from the late 1990s and even the early 90s, when he was a commentator commentating some of the best matches and doing some of the best commentary apart from anyone, and that takes into consideration Gorilla Monsoon and Gordon Solie, who were some of the best commentators that you could have ever had in professional wrestling, and he was one of the best on commentary. I really believe that on commentary nobody could touch Vince McMahon. I know they might have done it to cover up the fact that Vince McMahon was the promoter of the WWE, but he really was one of the best commentators because he was just so exciting to listen to, and he made every match that he commentated kind of like how Jim Ross made it in the late 1990s when they were promoting The Attitude Era. I mean, Jim Ross has been said to make a snail race entertaining, and the same thing can be said about Vince McMahon. He was one of the top commentators, and that says a lot when you have commentators like Bobby Eaton and Gorilla Monsoon calling the action at ringside. Vince McMahon just made every match that he called so exciting, and I was really depressed. I went into a point of depression when I realized that Vince McMahon had been replaced by Jim Ross. I enjoyed hearing Vince McMahon's commentary. I enjoyed him kind of being rebellious against superstars like Jerry Lawler and, of course, Jim Ross when they had a little feud in the late 1990s before Vince McMahon. In the last few months of Vince McMahon's run as a commentator, and obviously that feud with Jim Ross was just to give us the idea and impression that Vince McMahon was eventually going to be leaving commentary and he was going to become an in-ring performer. I know it's been said that after doing something over 40 years it's just hard to walk away from, but I really think that it's time, all in all, for Vince McMahon to consider leaving the WWE in the hands of people like Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, people who he can trust and who he can kind of rest easy knowing that the WWE are in good hands and the WWE will still be as good as it was when he ran it probably 20 years ago. But Vince McMahon, the character, is really dead in my opinion, and he's nothing more than a disgrace right now, and that's why I want to feature this video on our YouTube channel for you. It'll open up the forum for you to give us your opinion on how you feel about Vince McMahon. Sure, Vince McMahon is making a lot of good decisions for the WWE, but they're happening off of camera. The decisions he's making on television are really unbeneficiary to me as a radio show's columnist and more so as a wrestling fan, and they have to be very unbeneficiary to you. I mean, when it comes down to wrestlers choosing their own opponents for pay-per-views, you kind of have to question, what kind of mindset are the WWE creative team in? What kind of mindset are the stockholders of WWE in when you're allowing superstars like John Cena and Alberto Del Rio to choose their own opponents for SummerSlam? Just recently, John Cena chose Daniel Bryan. Alberto Del Rio chose his opponent for a recent edition of SmackDown. What's the mindset of WWE when you have people like Vince McMahon coming on television becoming more senile seemingly every week as the weeks go by, and it's just getting worse? There's no point of